Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Joanna Whaley podcast. For my live listeners, I apologize for being a little late today. And also for my asynchronous audience, the show sounds a little different today because I've been having all kinds of problems with my recording equipment this morning. Long story short, I pay for my recording equipment and for some reason, it's defaulting to all the free stuff today, so it sounds very archaic and not usually the full quality that I have. So I apologize to my audience for that. But welcome to the show, friends, where the show must go on, as they say, as we say in the show business, in the podcasting world. The show is going on. My name's Joanna Whaley. I'm a former evangelical pastor, and I'm a transgender woman. And yeah, those two identities have at times been very problematic in my world and in my life. For 18, 20 years of my life, I was working as a megachurch pastor. All the while I was a closeted trans woman, and you can imagine just the sheer chaos that came with that came with trying to understand and be myself while holding all of these different identities that I knew were not going to support me and were not going to fully accept who I am on the inside. And all that time later, where I'm coming up on 3 years being out now, and I've been really thankful, even with a frustrating day like today, trying to get my recording equipment going. There's a lot of joy in the work I'm doing now, in trying to pave the way and create a path for those who have been told that they can't hold faith anymore because of who they are, who they love. I've continued to do spiritual care to the LGBTQ community, especially after coming out, and it's been a huge joy. And I'm looking forward to a whole nother year of podcast content and creating music. And as of 2 days ago, I finished my master's program, master's in theology. So I'm so happy that I get to do what I do, and I'm happy that you're here live and listening. And for those on TikTok, this could be our very last live recording on TikTok. You can go follow me on all the other channels. Find me on Facebook at Joanna Whaley Music. Find me on Instagram, YouTube, Joanna Whaley Music on all of those, and Blue Sky. Just go find me, as we may no longer have our live stream on TikTok anymore. Well, today we are in a series. We're in the second week of this series called INAUGURATION, AGITATION. And my question today, the topic that I want to go after today, hello Danny on live, nice to see you. But the question that I want to really dive into today is, why is Christianity in today's world so obsessed with oppression? Why is it? And yes, friends, I am a trans woman, and I am going to read a Bible passage to you. Yes, it is true. A trans person can read the Bible. A trans person can know the Bible and study the Bible and teach the Bible. Here I go. I want to read today from a passage in the Christian text called Exodus. Exodus 22. It says this: "You shall not wrong or oppress the resident alien. For if you were aliens in the land of Egypt, you shall not abuse any widow or orphan. If you do abuse them, when they cry out to me, I will surely heed their cry. My wrath will burn, and I will hurt you with a sword. And your wives shall become widows, and children become orphans." Seems like a pretty grim text, right? It seems pretty grim. read, and sometimes Christian text can feel pretty grim. But the reality is, as a queer person myself, I look at our faith system, the faith system that I'm a part of even today, and it at times seems pretty grim, especially because there are so many bullies within my own faith system who tell me that I, as a trans person, am not welcome, that I should be weeded out, that I shouldn't be welcome in my own faith as a queer person, as a trans woman. I don't know if you, when you were in school, I all throughout high school and middle school, elementary school, I struggled with bullies on the playground. And these kids were always, maybe it's just me, my therapy session today, but the bullies on the playground, nobody liked them, right? But I remember every day dreading recess. Like, I dreaded going to recess. I dreaded just anytime the bell would go off, and I was just fearful of going on the playground because there were so many bullies in our school. And I was just thankful anytime I didn't have to be around them, right? And this is a picture today of what we see in Christianity. Anytime a queer person interacts with somebody with like the Jesus t-shirt on, or like passes by the church group that's handing out their tracts or whatever, we get that feeling sometimes that we are near the bully on the playground right now. We fear the Christian because of their proximity to oppression at times. People fear it because the reality is that many Christians in today's world, especially towards the queer community, tend to be the bully on the playground. So, what are we going to do? How do we navigate this? If I had to give you another title today, if I have to title today's podcast, it would be Resist the Bully Mindset. At the beginning of this, I read a Christian text in Exodus 22, and, since I just got my master's in theology, I might as well teach you some Greek, friends. Yes, a trans person knows the Greek in the Bible. There's this word, right? In the beginning, it says, you shall not wrong or oppress, right? The Greek word for wrong is yana, and it comes from this root. It's a root word of rage or to be violent. These are the words that come from the ancient Greek. And its implications were meant to suppress others, or to maltreat or to destroy someone else. This other word, lokats, is the Greek word for oppress. Okay? When you read that Exodus text, it says, you shall not wrong, yana, or oppress, lokats, which also comes from to treat poorly, or to press someone into distress, to afflict, to crush, to force, to thrust one's will on someone else. That's what these words mean. And then the stranger. Who are we talking about here? This word, gar, that is the Greek word for stranger. And this is the idea of a guest, of someone new. But we also need to understand that it is a verb for the human being. Stranger, gar, is not a noun. It isn't someone that you think is different. It's not some person that is the other. It is the verb of a human being. So when we yana, when we wrong someone, when we lokats, when we oppress someone, we are oppressing a stranger, someone who is a guest in our world. It is a verb. It is a person, a human being that we are oppressing. And right now, Christianity is obsessed with all of these things, with oppressing and wronging other human beings. Why? Why? There's these queer commentaries that I really love. One of them is called the Queer Bible Commentary, and I love it. I love it. I love it. But it really dives into this passage and talks about when queer intersectionality comes into human existence, when the queer community intersects with the heteronormative community, with the Christian hetero world, what begins to happen is, why do we see this bullying towards the LGBTQ person? It's because many people believe that the queer person threatens the ethno-nationalism of democracy. That the queer person challenges the norms. The queer person challenges all that you thought you knew. When you see a queer person thriving in your world, you think, oh my gosh, the norms of my society are being challenged. And many have equated that with their nationalism. They have equated that with their country. Ask any LGBTQ person out there, ask a queer person, what the American flag does to them in their spirit. I know when I see an American flag, living in America as a queer person, there's something in me, there's a hint of fear there, because the queer person has become a target of one side of the political divide, but it's mostly because the queer person challenges and disrupts this idea of, understandable or predictable democracy and predictable world around us. So there's 3 things I want you to walk away with today. You can tell, as I was a preacher, as a young pastor, I loved the 3-point sermon, right? So if you notice, sometimes on this show, I give you 3 things to walk away with. As we're looking at this text in Exodus, the first thing is, being the oppressor should never have been a Christian identifier. Being an oppressor should not ever be a Christian identifier. Melissa Kelly is an author. Love her book called Grief. It is a great book, Grief, A Contemporary Theory and Practice of Ministry. Writes in her book, she talks about this idea of grief being born of injustice. You see, right now, the queer person, especially in America where I live, has this internal grief, especially after what we saw in this recent election. There is a grief that has been born of injustice. You want to know why the queer person is so distrustful of a nation? You want to know why the queer person is so distrusting of religion? It is because there has been a grief born in injustice. And it's hard to see the liberation theology that is in the Christian faith when those who claim Jesus are not as concerned for the outcast as we see even in Christian scripture. Even in Luke's gospel. Yes, Luke's gospel has deep concern for the outcast. But why? Where have we found this ability to oppress when we read the Gospels, which are loaded with concern for the outcast? Gregory Ellison, in his concepts of fearless dialogues, talks about one of the main concerns of all humanity is the fear of oppressive systems. This is one of the main concerns of all human beings, is that we will enter into something, we will bring ourselves to something, but the system will reject us. You want to know why the queer person is so afraid of the church? It is because we don't want, and many of us have given our whole hearts and our whole efforts to the Christian church, and the system pushed us out. This is why there is so much disdain for the church from the queer community. Because we watch people who read things like the book of James, who read the book of Luke, right? And continue to prey on the poor of our world. Many people have this spiritual life on the outside, yet on the inside are okay with and content with inequality within their faith system. Being the oppressor, if you are a Christian, should never be an identifier of you. The second thing I want you to hear today is that abuse should be the last association of a believer. Abuse. Now, this week, I just took a whole course. My final course of my master's program was all about spiritual abuse and other types of abuses within the religious world, and understanding it and how to work against it and combat it. But I think it's really important to understand that these abuses are far beyond just one type of thing, right? We have to call out the elephant in the room. And the algorithms are really not going to like what I'm about to say. But, abuse within the Christian world goes beyond sexual abuse. It goes to spiritual abuse. It goes to, emotional abuse. There's so much of it that goes on. And many people, especially now, are rejecting religion because of the myriad of abuses that have gone on within religion. And many people wonder, why are our churches not growing? Why are our denominations not growing? It's because many of us were raised in a generation of parents who were terrible human beings, but put on their church smile on Sundays. You want to know why? It's generational distress. You want to know why you fly a rainbow flag on your church and no queer people are showing up? It's because of the whole of religion. It's because that church just can't be trusted. Christians just can't be trusted. And so for us, it's important to understand that your spiritual rituals, words out of your mouth as a Christian, do not say anything to the queer person. It's what you do after the creed is over. It's what you do when the song is over. It's what you want to be associated with. If you're tolerating queer, transphobia, homophobia within your churches, and you're letting people say the things on your social media threads, and you're not correcting it or getting rid of these things in your contexts, you're becoming associated with them. I'm going to read this quote from an author, forgot to write the first name down, Swinton. It says, "A society that is inattentive to the essential interconnectedness of its participants is a society that is open to the possibility of justifying abuse." I think many times we hear churches justify the abuse of queer people for the sake of love. We hear churches, we hear Christians justify the abuse of LGBTQ people ideologically, spiritually, emotionally, physically. We hear this justification, and it continues to erode our trust in the institution. Is there any good news in this? Is there any good news of anything that I'm talking about today? I think as we looked at that passage in Exodus, I think the last thing to hear and understand is that God hears the cry of the oppressed. So to you, the queer person who has been systematically abused by religion, God hears you. God hears the cry of the oppressed. Be heard and not oppressed. Comment sections and threads can get toxic and tell you who you are or not, and especially with some of the recent news of social media networks not going to take any more steps to protect the queer community, the trans community. This week on Facebook, we had, some pretty problematic language show up in a public update of community standards. And those of us in the queer community, especially those of us in the trans community, seeing the word transgenderism in Facebook's new policies was heartbreaking. And you know who's the voice behind this problematic, oppressive language? It's generally Christians. If I can call it what it is, it's just generally Christians. It's important for me to always say, because I know some people listen to the show live and they chime in late, but I'm a trans person and I'm a Christian. How I have held on to this Christian faith for so long sometimes is a miracle, but it's because I hold on to the idea and remember that God hears the cry of the oppressed. God hears the cry of the oppressed. Every human being has values, priorities, commitments in life, no matter who they love, who loves them. We all want justice. We all want to live with integrity and love, and we want those things to guide us. And we need to understand that God can meet us in those places. Right now, there's people struggling with the weight of oppression of the Christian church. My phone goes off every single day with someone who is in the closet and cannot come out because of their religious environment. I need you to hear me say to you that God hears your cry. He hears your cry. People struggling under this weight of oppression have always and long understood that God is not found in the picture of the oppressor. God is found, as Martin Luther King said, in the long arm that bends towards injustice. Or towards justice, sorry. The long arm that bends towards justice. God is found there. And yeah, Look, the orange Jesus is about to take office in a little over a week from the recording of this episode. And many who hold Christianity as something dear to them are celebrating, as those of us in the LGBTQ community are looking in fear at what this man coming into office is going to mean for our flourishing. What is this going to mean for us? My hope is to lean into and remember that God is found in his long arm that bends towards justice. So what are these? Remember these three things. Being the oppressor should never be a Christian identifier. The second thing, abuse should be the last association of a Christian believer. And the last thing is that God hears the cry of the oppressed. To my LGBTQ friends out there, remember that. Continue to lean in and remember that the oppression of man is not the image of God. And to the Christian listening to this show, please remember to be on the right side of history. Do you want your faith to represent oppression, or do you want it to represent the fullness of justice and love? Friends, thank you for listening to the show today. Again, thank you for pressing through some of my technical difficulties today. I'm going to be trying to figure out how to get the show back online next week with all the bells and whistles. Thanks for putting up with the basic audio today. If you are an LGBTQ person and you need support, you can go to joannawhaley.com/support. I've got many ways that you can get support from me. You can also go to patreon.com/JoannaWhaley if you want to go direct there for as little as $1 a month. I can give you direct message support. And then at other tiers, I can do Zoom calls with you and just be a supportive spiritual presence in your life. If you are an ally or a parent of a queer kid and you are nervous about where we're going right now in this country and how an interpretation of Jesus is being used against you and your family, please reach out. Go to joannawhaley.com/support. Let's chat. I'm here for you. Friends, as you go, remember, I like to say this all the time. I stole it from the pastor of my new church. You are not a problem for God. Whoever you are, whoever you love, you are not a problem for God. Friends, thank you for listening to the show. We'll see you next week with hopefully all the bells and whistles back on the show.